and Sandra Greenberg were settled in for the evening when a call came from Philadelphia. Something terrible has happened to Ellie. Their only child, Helen Greenberg, was dead. And in an instant, on that night in 2011, their world just turned around. Little did they know, it was only going to get more turned around. Helen was a 27-year-old elementary teacher, and she had been discovered seated on the kitchen floor inside her locked apartment with a serrated-edged knife plunged 4 inches into her chest. A strainer filled with blueberries and orange, appearing freshly sliced, rested on the counter. There were 2 clean knives in the sink, and 20 stab wounds, with 10 of them to the back of Ellen's neck, covered her body. Police on the scene treated Ellen's death as a suicide, but the next day the medical examiner's office determined it was a homicide. Then, after detectives dug up more information, they dug in their feet, and the Aimee's office made what I consider a rare flip-flop, changing the manner of death back to suicide. The Greenbergs found their emotions whipsawing back and forth as the Philadelphia officials disagreed with what happened in the corner of that small and otherwise undisturbed kitchen. Josh, age 68, a periodontist, and Sandra, 62, a dental hygienist, felt a world away at their home in Harrisburg. But as they gradually came to learn the extent of their daughter's injuries and the peculiarities of the scene, they started asking, what is going on? And they started a quest that no parent should ever have to undertake, to find out how their daughter died. And they said, it just doesn't add up. We want to know the truth. On the day that Ellen died, January 26th, 2011, a storm had blanketed the city with snow. Juanita Park Academy, where Ellen taught the first grade, was dismissed early, and she returned to Venice Loft Apartments, where she shared an apartment with her fiancé, Samuel Goldberg, age 28 at the time. He was a TV producer, and he and Ellen lived together on the 6th floor. And he was there until about 4:45 when he went to use the gym in their apartment complex. He returned a half an hour or so later and found himself locked out. The apartment's swing bar lock was engaged from the inside. He banged on the door, but got no response, so he tried to text Helen. He sent her some pretty increasingly frustrated texts over the next 22 minutes, understandably. They started out like this. Hello. Open the door. What are you doing? I'm getting mad. Hello. You better have an excuse. What the? You have no idea. Sam then goes to the lobby. He speaks with a man named Phil, the only security guard that night. He presses Phil to break the lock on the apartment, but it was against policy. And so Sam decides to force the door open himself. And then he calls 911 at 6:33 p.m. Sam was instructed to start CPR until he noticed the knife protruding from her surveillance cameras at the main entrance, but none in the hallway leading to the apartment. Neighbors would tell police that, aside from Sam banging on the door, there had been no signs of a disturbance. The couple's 6th floor unit had a narrow balcony, but the snow from that day was undisturbed. Everything that happened pretty much happened right where she was, Homicide Sergeant Tim Cooney would later say. The rest of the apartment was pretty unremarkable. Cooney said Ellen's death was treated as a suicide that night for several reasons. The apartment door had been locked until it was broken by Sam. He remained on the scene and he was cooperative with the police. There were no signs of an intruder, and the lack of defensive wounds favored heavily in the police's determination. Investigators investigated Ellen's laptop and found nothing indicative of suicide. She didn't even leave a note. The day after Ellen's death, in a grim brick building in University City, Assistant Philadelphia Medical Examiner Marlon Osborne began Ellen's autopsy at the city morgue. He labeled her stab wounds with letters, beginning with A. He stopped at T. He noted 8 wounds to Ellen's chest. They ranged from punctures just 0.2 centimeters deep to the final 4-inch plunge of the still embedded knife. She had a 2-inch stab wound to her stomach and a 2.5-inch long gash across her scalp. There were 10 wounds just from nicks to 2 to 3 inches deep on the back of Ellen's neck. There were 11 bruises in the stages of resolution on Ellen's right arm, abdomen, and right leg. At the end of the autopsy, Osborne weighed in all of his observations and reached a manner of death. He said, "Homicide." Josh and Sandra Greenberg were preparing for their daughter's funeral when they learned of the ruling through friends who'd seen it on the news. At the packed service in the Beth El Temple, Harrisburg, Josh eulogized his daughter and shared the news. "You may have heard that Ellen killed herself," he told the mourners, "but her death has just been ruled a homicide." And the room was silent. With the medical examiner's ruling, Ellen's death became the concern of the Philadelphia Homicide Unit. Investigators reviewed her Sam's key fob and security videos to make sure that everything matched what he had told them. Police said that it did, and the videos also showed no signs of unauthorized access of the entrances around the time of Ellen's death. On January 29th, 2011, a police spokesperson said that despite the homicide ruling, authorities were leaning towards suicide in Ellen's case and looking into any mental issues she might have had. A month or 2 before her death, Ellen had begun to display what people described as a marked change in demeanor. Her parents watched as their bubbly, outgoing daughter suddenly became unsettled and anxious. When they questioned her about it, she would only say that she was just stressed out about her job. Her mom would say that she was trying to go full circle, trying to figure out anything that she would be concerned about. One of Ellen's best friends, a woman named Debbie, said that she was just struck when Ellen went from being one of the happiest people she knew to filled with anxiety. Debbie said that she kept saying it was because of school, but Ellen was just very vague about everything, and if she asked her, there would just be long because she didn't want to discuss it. A woman named Aimee taught school with Ellen at Juanita Park, and when Ellen had some rough kids in her class, Aimee said, but she seemed no more stressed than the other teachers. Around this time, Ellen had asked her parents if she could move back home with them to Harrisburg. They thought it was kind of odd, given the fact that she was supposed to be marrying Sam in August, but Ellen told them that it had nothing to do with Sam. At the time, she didn't complain about anyone or anything, Josh Greenberg would say, except that she wanted to come home. Concerned, her parents urged her to see a psychiatrist, and she did. She said she felt overwhelmed at work, but she didn't have any suicidal feelings, and that she had nothing but good things to say about her fiancé. The psychiatrist would later tell investigators, and I understand why they did that, but I felt like that was kind of like an invasion of privacy, even though they were wondering if she committed suicide. That psychiatrist could have just said that she had no suicidal ideations, that everything didn't have to be revealed, but whatever. The psychiatrist even noted that Ellen smiled when she spoke of Sam, so that she didn't describe any verbal or physical confrontations with Sam. The psychiatrist said that Ellen did have severe anxiety and that she had prescribed her an anti-anxiety drug, Klonopin, and Ambien for sleep. Now, both of these medications list suicidal thoughts and behavior as possible side effects. They were the only two drugs found in Ellen's system when she died. The psychiatrist last saw Ellen on January 19th. 3 days later, Ellen had her last communication with many of her loved ones when the save-the-date cards for her wedding arrived in their mailboxes. This was just 4 days before her death. Now, the aforementioned Sergeant Cooney, the homicide sergeant who was supervising the investigation, a man named Detective John McNamee, and other assigned detectives believe that the information that they developed strengthened the case that Ellen killed herself. She was anxious. She was found in a locked apartment with no evidence of a struggle. No other person's DNA was on the knife. Detectives believe that the shallow puncture wounds on her body were her test or hesitation wounds, as she considered stabbing herself to death. She had no marks on her body that indicated that she fought with an attacker. In an effort to resolve the dispute over the manner of death, McNamee suggested hiring an outside neuropathologist to review a portion of Ellen's spinal cord to determine if it was damaged by any of the wounds to the back of her neck. If it was, this would have rendered her incapacitated and unable to inflict the subsequent wounds on herself, including the final plunge to her neck. I thought that was a smart thought, but according to McNamee, the neuropathologist who conducted the exam told police that the spinal cord sheath was hit, but the cord was not severed. Ellen most likely had some numbness, which allowed herself to stab herself repeatedly. After initially ruling Ellen's death a homicide, on March 7th, the ME reversed itself and changed the manner of death to suicide, siding with the police investigators. We couldn't prove anything else, McNamee said. We were just letting things go where it went, and that's where it went. The Greenbergs were devastated. Sandra said she was just in so much shock. And they were also upset about how they found out on the news. They didn't get a phone call. They found out on the news. Meanwhile, they continued to recruit experts to join in their quest for the truth. One of them was a man named Tom Brennan, necessarily support suicide. He had seen many stabbing victims without defensive wounds. It's referred to as a blitz attack, he says, where the victim is attacked so quickly they are unable to defend themselves. But something else nagged at Brennan. The images of Helen at the scene show a stream of dried blood running horizontally across her cheek from the side of her nose towards her left ear, but her body was upright when she was found. Police had theorized that she'd stabbed herself while standing and slid seated to the floor, and that her body was never moved. But how do you explain the horizontal stream of blood on her cheek? The blood flow baffles Guy D'Andrea as well. Once a Philadelphia homicide prosecutor, he's now a private practice. While he still worked in the DA's office, he reviewed Ellen's entire case file in 2015 at the request of an acquaintance who heard about the puzzling case. The bloodbath defies gravity, D'Andrea said. You don't need to be a pathologist to have an appreciation for that. Either she moved herself or someone moved her. And then there was the question of how 10 stab wounds to the back of Ellen's neck, one of them that damaged her spinal cord. Just a single line about the spinal cord exam appears in Ellen's autopsy. Neuropathologist Dr. Lucy Rourke examined the spinal cord and concluded that there is no defect. The reference was to Lucy Rourke Adams, a renowned neuropathologist who retired from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in 2015. When D'Andrea, the former homicide prosecutor, looked through the file, he said he couldn't find a neuropathology report, so he requested a copy from the police and the ME's office, but he was told that it couldn't be found or it didn't exist, and an invoice for this could not be found either. Dr. Rourke Adams, in an email, confirmed that she did contract work for the ME's office in 2011. Without a report or a bill, she would conclude that she did not see the specimen in question, although there is a remote possibility that it was shown to me, she wrote. However, I have no recollection of such a case. In a rare bit of kismet during his research, Brennan would make a surprising discovery. A piece of Ellen's spinal cord was still kept in storage at the ME's office. I'm sorry, what? He contracted a man named Wayne Ross, a forensic pathologist, for the Lancaster, Dauphin, and Cumberland counties to examine this specimen. He concluded that one of the stab wounds penetrated Ellen's cranial as well as the gash on her head, could be indicative of homicide, McDonald said. That is not the typical pattern of someone who commits suicide through a sharp instrument like that. Like others, McDonald noted, the stab wounds went through Ellen's clothing. Most people, if they inflict the wounds on themselves, pull the clothes up. They don't go through the clothing, he said. Robert D. Keppel, retired chief, I can't spell, and I wrote chef, criminal investigator for the Washington State Attorney. He investigated Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer, was struck that the knife was left lodged in Ellen's body, something he had never seen in a suicide before. He said, in this particular case, there's so many wounds, it almost looks like somebody else is doing the thing with her. DeAndrea believes that for every piece of evidence someone could point to and say, this is suicide, he believes that they could also reasonably point to some other evidence and suggest it was homicide. After Krasner's election as district attorney, the Greenbergs contacted the DA's office to see if their old lawyers would reopen Ellen's case. Krasner referred the matter to the state attorney general in February of 2018 to avoid the appearance of conflict of interest. That was a long time ago, and they were recently pressed for answers, and they were told that the office had done a thorough investigation. They looked at Ellen's computer, and it included search terms such as suicide methods, quick suicide, and painless suicide. This man also provided some of Ellen's text messages as well. I'm starting on the med. I know you don't understand, but I can't keep living feeling like this, Ellen texted her mom. 9 days later, she texted her, Klonopin helps. Thank God. So happy for you, her mom wrote back. Me too. Oh my God, Ellen responded. The day before Ellen's death, Sandra texted her, you need to see a professional. Ellen replied, I'm trying. I am just scared a bit for everything. According to that Joe Grace, he said, this evidence supports suicide as a manner of death, and the investigation was once again closed. When he was asked why the Emmy's April 15th, 2011 report said nothing indicative of suicide had been found on Ellen's computer and why DeAndrea saw nothing about this in the DA's file, Joe Grace said that his office did not find the analysis in the DA's file, so we cannot say if anyone ever looked at it. His office obtained it last year from the RCFL. When asked about the neuropathology exam, Grace said Dr. Rourke Adams has no independent recollection of participating in the investigation, and we have not found a copy of this report. Still, the office believes there is ample evidence that it happened based on the line in the autopsy report and the statement from 2 detectives. The Greenbergs have these questions and more. The fact that Ellen's computer Googled these suicides, but she was stabbed to death, and experts say it's suspicious. Her dad says, what am I supposed to say? The Greenbergs feel that Ellen's case did not get a thorough enough investigation. They want copies of her files, but Joe Grace said his office would not release them. Josh Greenberg said, I am disgusted and disappointed and punched in the stomach, but this is not over. Okay, what do I think? I think she was murdered. First of all, you're not standing at the kitchen preparing fruit to eat and then shallowly stabbing yourself in the back of the neck. Like, you're not doing that. No person would commit suicide that way. And I feel like if she googled painless suicide, she would not have stabbed herself, because that's not painless. was I could sit down with Sean and we could like have these really bantery conversations about, because he always thinks one way and I always think another because I'm biased because I've researched so much true crime. I just honestly don't think that if she had the gumption to stab herself, I feel like the knife would have come with her hand and fallen to the side. I don't think she would have left it in there. Maybe because she didn't want to cause herself any more pain. I don't know. I'm curious to what you guys think. Please, please, please tell me in the comments down below. I feel so bad for her parents, and I do hope that they keep fighting for this. I don't know what, maybe just peace of mind will come from it. There wasn't any DNA. I do think, okay, well, there was 2 knives in the sink. I want to know if those 2 knives were investigated to see if maybe any of them made either of the stab wounds. Were they fingerprinted? Were they searched for someone else's DNA? I'm sure that they did, but I couldn't find any reports that said that. There were a lot of high-profile investigators on this case donating their time looking into this case, so that tells me that there's enough evidence for people to believe exactly as I believe that this was some kind of murder. I don't think that, she was trying to get help. She was on medication. She was speaking with someone. She was, Klonopin was working for her. So I don't think, and it was in her system, so she was clearly taking it. Although I would like to know how much, to see if she had been regularly taking it, or if she was just taking it on that day. To see, maybe she was just having a moment, but I don't think that that was the case, and I don't know that there's anything that you could say to convince me that that was the case. I believe that suicidal people don't try to get help first. They just do whatever it is they're gonna do. I think that when people want help, don't take that the wrong way, don't come at me. I think that when people really know that they're feeling this way, they reach out for help, and they feel that way, but they don't really want to die, does that make sense? I think that people that are really committed to ending their own life don't necessarily talk about it first, because they're just set. They know that there's no help that can be given to them, and that's not true, but that's what they believe, and so they do the act without asking people for help first. Or maybe they have reached out for help and no one is helping them, but Helen had a wonderful support system in her family, and she had the psychiatrist and people that would listen to her, so I find it very hard to believe that that was the case. I do find it a little strange that she wanted to move home for a while, when she was due to get married to this Sam guy. But maybe, for me, my mom is my safe place, and when I'm feeling upset or disturbed or anything like that, that's who I want to talk to. My mom is my safety net. It's definitely a lot harder with the dementia now, and I've kind of felt like I've been free-falling without a safety net, but I could understand wanting to be maybe back in your childhood home, in your childhood room, when you're experiencing all these things that you've never ever experienced before. She was so happy, she didn't have all this anxiety, and for her to suddenly have all of these things, she might have just wanted a safe zone for a while. She didn't say anything about wanting to break up with Sam. She just wanted to be home with her parents, and I totally get that. I don't understand how people live across the country from their mom. I might be a giant baby for that, but I have to be able to get to her in a couple of minutes. So maybe that's what she was thinking, and that explains why she wanted to come home for a while. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. solved cases. I've done a lot of them lately, so I hope you'll bear with me for a little bit of a mystery. Thank you. I will catch you next time.